Okay, now that we've learned some basic chords and we've put those chords together to form our first song, I think the next step is to explain some basic music theory behind notes and how notes are formed. Before we move on and learn to play melodies, I think it's important for you to understand what's going on from a theoretical viewpoint. So we're not going to dig too deep into this, but we're just going to touch kind of what's going on, why notes are the way they are, and what's a sharp and what's a flat, and kind of the basic music theory. So in music, there's 7 natural notes. There's the A note, the B note, C, D, E, F, and G. Once you get to G, you don't go on and play an H note. There is no H. It goes back to A again. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so forth. It always repeats itself infinitely, up and down, at least as far as the ear can hear. So when we talk about the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, we're talking about natural notes. So let's take a look at a piano keyboard here, and you can see this a lot more clearly. The reason I'm showing a piano keyboard is that piano keys are laid out in a way that this is easy to explain visually on a piano, a lot easier than it is on the guitar. But if you'll notice, all the white keys are naturals. So let's start with the A here on a piano. If we start with this note, we'll go just to play the white notes. We'll go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And you'll notice the next note after G is A again. So look at the position where A is. It's the exact same position as it was before, except it's an octave higher. And that pattern continues on and on. It repeats itself. So those are your natural notes. Now the black notes, the black keys, I should say, on the piano are called accidentals. And accidentals are sharps and flats. So when we're talking about, if you ever hear someone talking about an F sharp or a G sharp or an F or a G flat, they're talking about an accidental note. And like I said, on the piano, this is very easy to see because they're color coded. They're black. And they're separated out from the natural notes. You don't have that on the guitar, so you have to just kind of know what's going on. So that's why I'm showing this on a piano, so you can understand. Now, one important thing to point out, and this is very crucial. Notice, okay, let's start at the F here on the piano. So we'll go right up the scale here. So we'll have F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B. But what's the next note after B? It's not a B sharp. Notice there is no black key there. So after B, you go straight to a C. That's an interesting thing that happens in music. It happens in 2 places. It happens between the B and the C, and it also happens between the E and the F. So you'll notice there is no E sharp or F flat. There is no black key between the E and the F, and there's no black key between the B and the C. So that's just very important to remember when we're talking about notes in music. So now let's kind of translate that a little bit to the guitar fretboard. Just as we walked consecutively, note for note on the piano, you can do the same thing on the guitar. You're just going from fret to fret. But even though we don't have the visual separation between the black keys and the white keys, the notes are still there. So if we start on the high E string on the guitar, which is, it's just I'm plucking the first string without pushing anything. That's the high E string. The reason we call it a high E string is because there's actually 2 E strings on the guitar. There's a high and a low, and they're 2 octaves apart. But we'll start with a high E string, and if I push the first fret, what note am I playing there? Now, if you'll remember back to the piano keyboard, there is no E sharp. So it's actually F. So first note is E. The next consecutive note is an F. The next note is an F sharp. The next note is a G. The next note is a G sharp. And the next note is an A. So just remember, on the guitar, it's the same as the piano. Between the E and the F, there is no accidental note. Same thing on the second string here. The first note that we play is a B. The next note we play is a... Is it a B sharp? No. the next note we play is a C. Because again, just like on the piano, between the B and the C, there is no accidental. So B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. Now this is an interesting thing to point out on the guitar. This is unique to the guitar as far as I know. Maybe this happens, well, it's unique to stringed instruments with a fretboard, I should say. But I notice I went from a B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. But if you'll remember, the first note on the first string, the open note on the first string, was also an E, and it's the exact same octave. So we're actually playing that same note in two different places. That's an interesting thing about the guitar. It allows you to play the same note in different positions. And that's how you can play, chords up and down the neck and scales and whatnot. So that's just something that's very important to point out on the guitar. If we move on to the third string, the first, or the open note, is a G. And the next note is a G sharp, then an A, then an A sharp, then a B, then what's after B? A C. So, since that's a B, and remember the open note on the second string is a B, they should sound exactly the same. Just like this being a C, it should sound just like this. So there's your first three strings on the guitar. Let's take a look really quickly at the bottom three strings, and I'll just kind of walk through note for note. We'll start with the D, which is it's the fourth string on the guitar. Open note is a D, D sharp, E. Remember, that's an E, that's an E. And between, there is no E sharp, so you go right to an F, F sharp, and G, which is the same note as the open note on the third string. Onto the fifth string, we have an A, if we play an open note, A sharp, B, there is no B sharp, remember? So we go right to a C, C sharp, and D. And remember, the first note or the open note on the fourth string was also a D. Now down to the very bottom string, the last string. If you play it open, it's just an open E. So these notes are actually going to be the same as what we learned on the first string. They're just going to be 2 octaves lower. So we have E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and A. Notice I only played up until the 5th fret. We're doing that on this lesson. We're not going to move past the 5th fret for now. So I hope that's been helpful, kind of understanding some of the theory behind how notes are formed, not just on the guitar, but in music in general.